In this video, we're going to take a look at new features for Monocle that have been in there for about a month now. We'll look at all the new features, the updated ones, and we'll take a look at a few other things as well along the way. If that sounds interesting, check out the rest of this video. Alright, so at the time of this recording, Monocle is in the version 2022 2.1. So my versioning that I use is called calendar versioning. So in this case, I released one release in February. And so it just goes incrementally in that way. Monocle, if you don't know, is fully open source on GitHub. All the source code is available to you. It's under a license that's pretty permissible of sharing this code and things like that. So check that out. And we publish releases on GitHub with release notes as well, kind of indicating what all's changed. As you can see, 2022.2.1 is the latest. This works for all Dynamo versions from 2.0 to 2.13, which encompasses Revit versions 18 to 22 at this time. So it's a pretty broad compatibility list, and we have very minimal dependencies on other toolkits as well with this tool. So in Dynamo, once you install Monocle, you will get a menu item up here that's just called Monocle. In the event that you don't want Monocle to load with Dynamo, you just hold down Shift as you open Dynamo, and I'll preview that here in a second. But in Monocle, we have an About menu, which gives you the version number that you have, and it has a few links on there as well if you want to check out any of the source code or anything like that. Within Monocle, we have a package usage dialog. This is one of my favorite features. So I have a sample file open for another tutorial that I'm going to work on shortly regarding pathfinding in 3D using a package called VASA. But in Monocle, we are able to indicate which packages are being used in a current Dynamo graph. In this case, I only have the custom package loaded of VASA in this graph. So if I were to click on annotate, it will go through and annotate all the nodes that are using a custom package. So that is something that's been available for a while. That's the first tool I added to Monocle, coincidentally. So it's still in there. That usage mode has the whole meme on it, the Doge. So you can use that version if you like. If you want a more professional looking version, that is available under the boring mode. And as you can see, we have a menu with the packages being used and all that stuff. In addition, we do have the ability to specify a prefix we want to use instead of custom node. So by default, it is custom node for that prefix, and then you can annotate your nodes and all that good stuff. You can also send the package usage to the clipboard. So if you were to place a note with Control W and paste it, it will give you the package, and if it can find it, the version number. Doesn't work all the time for version number, but it gets it right most of the time. In addition to that package usage, there is a keyboard shortcut, as you can see, Control-Shift-P on your keyboard for the boring mode. So Control-Shift-P, you will get the boring mode to pop up. So that's there for your usage. The next one that's part of the package usage is regarding custom nodes. So if you want to highlight custom nodes, you're able to do that now. This is an old feature that was kind of in beta for a while, and I removed it and someone asked for it back. So if I were to click on enable highlighting, we are circling custom nodes with a red grid at this time. You can actually customize that grid in the settings file, which we'll see in a little bit too. That also has keyboard shortcuts of Control-Alt-H for highlight and Control-Alt-R for remove highlight. That's a feature available to you in there. And once again, Control-Alt-H, highlight them, Control-Alt-R will remove the highlighting. Another command that's my favorite command of Monocle, so let's go ahead and ungroup one of these, is this little in-canvas widget. So previously this was called the in-canvas alignment widget. This is now called FOCA. There's a detergent called Dynamo actually out there. I saw it when we were at Built Australia a few years ago. Coincidentally, there is a detergent called FOCA as well. So if you look at this and hover, it will tell you that this is called FOCA, and it enables you to clean your Dynamo graphs. So you can enable it or disable it. By default, it's enabled, and it lets you do alignment commands as you highlight in Canvas. So I'm highlighting nodes. It gives you alignment commands, and it also gives you some grouping commands under this little eyedropper tool. As you use that, it will group and things like that. Another thing that we have in here in FOCA is we have the ability, if I have a list of numbers, for instance, so if I do 1 to 10, we'll run it. I have a whole list of numbers in here. If I want to get at any of these individual numbers right now in Dynamo, I can do something in a code block like X bracket 0 to get the first item and so on. So that works pretty well. If you want to get several, you'd have to do this over and over. So in Monocle, we actually have a little widget in here that busts the list out individual outputs for you. It's really useful when you want to break up a list into its individual outputs. And this does work with nested lists as well. Another one that we have is called the Combinifier, which is in Monocle. And once again, this is the updated version. If you have a version of Monocle that has all of the icons in the ribbon up here, you are on a previous version of Dynamo, which is fine. But those have had to be moved because in Dynamo 2.13 and up, this little window got pushed up a bit and they were clashing, so I had to remove them. So in the event that you want to combine things as well, you are able to use the Combinifier. The other thing that's cool to keep note of is these little context items. They are contextual now, so they kind of somewhat know what you have selected. So if you have a code block selected with several outputs or a list of outputs, you can explode that out into its individual items. But if you have multiple selected, it knows that you might want to combine them. So if you click on the shopping cart, it will place a list create node, and you are now able to combine those really quickly. For this example, I am in Sandbox, so that is another thing to keep in mind. Another tool that we have is the Dropdown Converter. So that's in there as well. That works with most standard dropdowns in Revit. It does work on some Sandbox dropdowns, but we'll look at it in Revit here in a second. So we'll look at that in a bit. And yeah, that's it for FOCA. It's just always in Canvas, kind of waiting for you to be using it. For these colors of the groups and the names, the titles, that's controlled through another menu. So if we were to go to Monocle, standard group creation, we are able to customize these in here. So if you pick different colors, you can do that and give it different titles. So I'll mess with this one and call it background 2. And then if I use that background, that carries through as well. So you can start to standardize those across your firm or whatever your style is. And then if we were to change the color, that would change as well. In addition to those customizations, we do have the ability to save settings or load settings or restore default settings. Monocle does ship with settings files for you. So there's the default Monocle settings, which gets overwritten when you make changes. And then there's one for generative design as well. So generative design uses a pretty specific color coding. So that's just included for you to be able to use if you're using generative design graphs that are available on the primer. So I just kind of added that because I found myself making a lot of those graphs, so it just made it easier for me. So we'll load that one real quick. Once it's loaded, you'll see that the new color scheme is loaded. We'll ungroup this, and we have all those different color coding that we need to use. And that is echoed in the custom grouping window as well. If I want to restore the default settings, I can just click on restore, and now the standard colors are back. So if you wanted to save your own custom files for your company, you would end up saving your current settings to the default path, and then you can rename those. Let's take a look at those default settings real quick. So like I mentioned, we have our default Monocle settings. So if we edit this in Notepad++, which is my favorite note editor to use, we can see that we have group settings in here. They have a group ID, which is important, and then it has text, color, and font size. So you can change these in a text way if you'd like. You don't have to do it in the Dynamo interface. You can also add more, and those will start to show in the menu item. They won't show in FOCA because it only allows 5, I think, or 6. but it will show in the window, so you will be able to scroll that. In addition to group settings, so if I collapse group settings, we have custom node identifier settings. You can change the border thickness and things like that, and you can change the custom node prefix in here as well. So this settings file was requested by a user, so it is available to you, and you can name your own and duplicate these as you please. And as you update Monocle, you can save your settings files to your network or whatever. So that's in there for you to use. So that kind of covers all the settings that we have in here available to us. In addition to those settings, we do have another item available to us. So the search in Dynamo is pretty good. If I were to type in list create, it'll find it most of the time. I've used Dynamo back when it was called list.create, so sometimes I'll type that. And sometimes you get good results, sometimes you don't. So list.cr starts to surface chop to the top of the list. That's not perfect. So in Monocle, if you go to simple search, we actually have our own version of search in here that works a little bit faster. It's not perfect, I'll admit that, but it's just doing a filter of all of the nodes available to us really quickly. In Dynamo, they have images assigned, they have all these cool graphics, and they have search criteria that they're targeting. So they're targeting a whole lot of search criteria, which is good, but we simplified it down to just search the node name and remove all formatting. So if you were to type in capital list space 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 create, we're bringing that down to just the title for you on the fly. So once again, I'll recreate that in the regular search, and it's not working. So the regular search is good for more in-depth searches at this time. The Monocle simple search does exactly what it says. It's a simplified search. It's searching just the node name, and it's removing all formatting for us. A simple search is also accessible with a Control F keyboard shortcut on your keyboard. So you do get simple search in that. The next feature that we'll show before we jump into Dynamo for Revit is standard views. So if you're a previous Monocle user, you probably recall the little standard view icons that would have appeared up in the toolbar before next to this export image. As mentioned before, the Dynamo workspace title has worked its way up into the toolbar, so I had to move these as well. These are accessible now in Canvas on this little hover icon on the right side next to the 3D glasses. And all these standard views provide are standard orthogonal views for you to be able to view your model. These are really helpful because finding a perfect view in Dynamo with the drag operation is pretty difficult. So we have things in here like plan view, we have a right view, front view, side view, and so on. And they get you pretty close. It gets a little bit closer, specifically when you're using this for something like a generative workflow or something like that. Particularly, I use the top view the most, more often than not. So that's standard views, and that's available in Sandbox and Dynamo for Revit. So before we jump in Revit, I'll close Dynamo real quick. Click no on save. And I'll hold down the left shift key on my keyboard and reopen Dynamo Sandbox. So I'm leaving the left shift held down right now on my keyboard. This is important. If you're in an environment where you're recording a tutorial video or something and you don't want to show custom packages or anything, if you hold down shift, it will force Monocle not to load, as you can see in the top toolbar right now. So it's not up here in the toolbar at this time. I needed that personally because I record a lot of tutorial videos for out-of-the-box Dynamo. So it's just in there if you want to use it. And if you're wondering, yes, the holding down shift, I got that idea from AutoCAD. So I used to use AutoCAD a long time ago. I don't anymore. And I remembered that we used to hold down shift to remove customization. So Monocle has that feature now as well. All right, so we'll jump into Revit real quick. And in my case, I'm just in the sample model and I have Dynamo already opened. So in Dynamo, I don't have Monocle loaded already because I want to show something to you. So if you've ever opened Dynamo and seen this notifications menu, it's a little bit annoying and it tells you something loaded something and it's freaking out. In this case, it's REST Sharp, which is a RESTful API wrapper that Autodesk uses in Revit, and a few custom packages use it as well, like Archilab. What happened here is whatever is using it in Revit's environment is using a different version than Archilab targeted, which is okay most of the time. It's less okay when you're in Revit with Dynamo, which both load in kind of the same backpack, if you will. So it's already loaded, so Dynamo's kind of freaking out. You'll see this exception quite a bit, and people freak out about it more than they need to a lot of the time. It used to show it for Revit DLLs as well. So the Revit API loading, it would tell you, oh, you built your package pointing at Revit 2019 and you're in Revit 22. Most of the time you can ignore that. In this case, you can even ignore this one and it's not going to break anything. The whole point of that story, though, is if you're in Revit and you have custom tools loaded, in this case, I have a family browser loaded. So at Parallax, we use a family browser for all of our content. They use customizations to make their app look like how they want, which is great. Family browser has a really nice UI, and that's why we like it so much. The downside is, since Dynamo's loading in the same environment as Revit, it is also getting customized to an extent. So if you've ever used Dynamo, you probably know that this is not how a slider is supposed to look. There's not supposed to be overlap at all or anything like that. A few other nodes I think are different as well. So if we go to categories, that one looks a little bit different too. What's going on is the plugin in Revit, in this case Family Browser, is loading that toolkit to customize their UI, but it's loading it for all of Revit as well. And it's loading it for Dynamo as well, since Dynamo's piggybacked on Revit. That's a little annoying when you have things that you're starting to build, like Simple Search, that don't work with this UI, because I don't have that tool and I didn't build my UI to interact with that. So that's another fix that we actually have in Monocle as well. So in this case, I actually need to install Monocle, since I don't even have it installed in this Revit version, and then we'll reopen Dynamo to see the difference. So in this case, you can also see that the package manager window is a little bit different. We'll install Monocle now. And right away, we can actually see that Monocle loaded, and it did fix the UI for us. So the dropdown is normal again and all that kind of stuff. I did mention Monocle is open source, so there is a fix to fix this, and it fixes Dynamo when Dynamo opens, which is really cool. So that's something that we've wanted for a while, and we added it to Monocle, so it just does it for you on the fly. It's specifically targeting if the toolkit that's loaded is called DevExpress. So that's a toolkit that you're able to use for C# development. In the case of Family Browser, they use that toolkit to make their UI look really nice. But like I said, it modifies Dynamo as well. So we're unloading it for Dynamo on startup. That's something. While we're in Revit, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this categories. I have other videos on this, but dropdowns change between Revit versions or files even. So we do have this dropdown converter. If you click on the dropdown converter, it will convert it to a code block representation. So code block converter is something you're probably pretty familiar with Monocle if you've ever used it before. It currently works with the categories dropdown, the family types dropdown, the element types dropdown, which is really cool. So if we were to pick a wall type in here, we'll see that I picked wall type. And if I want to convert this to a code block representation, I can as well. So that removes that inconsistency between Revit versions. For what it's worth, if you're upgrading Dynamo graphs between Revit versions, this might be partly what's breaking our dropdowns. So I plan on doing another video about migrating Dynamo graphs to newer versions eventually. But this is one thing to keep an eye out for. So if you know that this categories node always needs to be walls, don't use a dropdown. Just use a category by name node or a code block like this to do it. You have a few options there. Other than that, that's what Monocle has. If we update Monocle, so if Monocle is ever updated, it will be reflected on GitHub. So just to mock this up for this example, what we'll do is I'll just go ahead and make a new release. So hopefully no one gets this update whenever I'm currently making this. So it is March, so the first release of March. We'll do testing for video, and I'll make this release. And then in Dynamo Sandbox or Dynamo Revit, whenever you reload Dynamo, we will let you know, hey, there's an update available. And with Dynamo restarted in Monocle, we should see that there is an update available on the menu. So it tells you about Monocle, there's an update available 2022.4.1. So that tells you to go update it through the package manager. That's a really nice way to see which version you have and what version's latest. And so there it is. All the new features in Monocle. I did include time chapters down below, so if you need to share specific clips of the video, do that. Check it out. If you have any feature requests, issues, anything like that, do it on GitHub. And other than that, I hope it helps out for making Dynamo graphs a lot cleaner, and thanks for checking it out.